guys, it's September 6th. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope all of you had a great Labor Day. And on today's Stitchy Talk, I am going to show stitching. I'm going to show some long stitches. And I'm also going to show French knots and colonial knots. And just kind of, I'm not an expert on any of this, but I can show you kind of how I make it work for my stitching. And in our Stitchy Talk in October, I am going to go over Autumn Love and how I'm going to be monogamously stitching that piece and talk a little bit about counting stitches and how you can stay on track with the project. And then in November Stitchy Talk, I am going to talk about fancy floss and keeping two strands together versus doing the loop method and how your pieces will look different. So that's a little bit to look forward to. And of course, every Wednesday we have a live stream talking about progress. So we're going to kind of jump right in. The project I'm working on today is Fall on the Farm by Little House Needleworks. And it's 9 parts. So this designer is Little House Needleworks. And so what I did right before we started is I went ahead and did some long stitches. And I'm going to kind of talk about kind of what I did. So I had Sarah make a grid just like the pattern. And the pattern normally says fruits and veggies, farm stand. But I saw a lot of people on Instagram and stuff showing where they put their last name. So I put my last name, which is Jolly, and so she just drew out the names. Basically, you could do that on graph paper or anything like that if you wanted to, but that's basically how we did that. So that's how I came up with that. And I was going to talk a little bit about what we're going to do today. Now these, I'm doing all of these as a long stitch, and basically I start and end, so that's over 3 stitches. You could do it as a back stitch. I just think it might look chunky. Now when you're looking at this, my black stitches look a lot better than my white stitches. So my white stitches kind of look choppy, so I might redo those, I might not. I'm gonna decide when I go to my desk later. And I went ahead and did this long stitch. I actually don't like that long stitch, so I'm gonna take it out and I'm gonna show you how. Right here, I'm gonna just do this one without the camera. So I just don't like it. I don't think it looks good. I'm just gonna pull it out. I think it looks better without it. So I'm gonna leave that out. So you can always make it work for you. I didn't think it really needed that. And because I'm stitching on Aida, you're supposed to stitch in the center. And so if I was stitching with an even weave or a linen, there would have been an exact hole to go into. And so I just didn't think it looked good, so I just pulled that out. Now, one thing to do before you do back stitching, or the way I do it, is I got all 9 of her patterns and wrote down what I need to do for finishing for all of these. So I needed to back stitch the sign and the hanger, and I've done that. So I'm going to take the part 2. Right here, this was supposed to be back stitches and the chicken's eyes, but I decided to do those as cross stitches. So I'm going to show you what it would have looked like on the pattern. And on the pattern, those are back stitches. And I just did it as a cross stitch, so I wouldn't have to come back and do that. So that's done. I don't need to do that, so we'll mark that off. Here we're going to add a sign that says no crows and a hanger. These two don't have any. This one has a sign and a hanger, and then there's some back stitches in the windows. I might or might not do those. On 7, there's also lettering. On the kitty, there's whiskers, and on the pigs, there are French knots for eyes, and then none over here. So a couple things I wanted to point out before I start is We did get a comment that they were thinking this should be a flower over here, just like this one. And on the chart, it's not there. But I do agree that it would look better, so I am going to go ahead and add this. So it will be there. And let's see. So I'm going to go to part 3. So we've done this. Now, again, I might pull the stitches out. I might not. You can comment and let me know what you think. One thing when you're doing long stitches, always feel free to start over and rip out. And I do have some tips on how to get it to look nice. And I did that on both of these, and you can see my charcoal stitches or caterpillar stitches look better than my bamboo stitches. But I'm going to be working over here, so I'm going to roll this up. And then we're going to get the light in place and try to stitch with the light. And what I like to do is just get as much of the material out of my way as possible. So I've got this. Now, what I'm going to do, and I've already done it, is take half a strand of caterpillar. So I've already cut the strand in half. When you're working with long stitches or back stitches, if your thread is super long, it's going to make it more difficult. And I'm going to just use this little stitchy stand by Lori to make it easier to see. And I'm going to thread one side. And you're just using one strand. Now, of course, when you're reading a pattern, some designers use 2 strands on back stitches and long stitches and French knots, and some use 1. I say use whatever you think looks best. I'm going to use 1. And what we're going to do right here is we're going to put the word no crows and then the little like sign hanger. And to start, I'm going to kind of start over here before I go to the... To start, what I'm going to do to anchor it is go under 4 or 5 stitches. Okay, like that. I'm going to go under. Now, this is probably not the correct way to do it, but this is what I do. Okay, that's way too long. Too long of a strand. So what I'm going to do is just stop there. I'm going to cut my strand. It's too long. Rethread. And then right here, I'm going to keep my thumb here. I probably made it too short now. I'm going to go through here and just anchor it. It's kind of like a little knot. Now, you want to pull it, make sure it's not moving. Okay. Now, what I have found when you're working with long stitches, if you do the really long stitches first and then your smaller stitches second, it will look better. So I'm going to start, I think I start here. So I'm going to go down, let's see, 2 stitches. So what I mean by that is I'm going to do all these big long stitches first. So I'm going to go and I'm going to start in the same spot. So up, down, start back up, go down. And so this is going to say no crows, but this is going to be the no, N-O. So you're going to see I'm going to do the 4 long ones because then they're consistent, and starting and ending in the same spot gives it consistency. So those are nice and straight. Now if you were going to do a back stitch, you would do 1 and 1 instead of 1 big one. So you do 2 stitches instead of 1. Now what I'm going to do is go back and I'm going to add the cross for the N. And Also, when you're back stitching or long stitching, just try not to pull too tight. So it kind of leaves it a little bit fat, if that makes sense. Like, just don't pull all the way. Okay, so that says no. Let me see. It looks pretty good. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the little sign up here so that it, now what it's supposed to do is go in the middle right here. It's supposed to go right there in between that stitch, but because I'm using Aida, there's not a hole. So I'm going to try to make one. So I'm going to start over here. See, I made it too short. But I think it's better to do too short than too long. I'm going to create a hole and we'll see if it looks good. It might not look good. So this is how it looks. Looks pretty good. So from here, I'm going to run this under. Look at this mess back here. I'm just going to run this. Oh, actually, I can run it through his arms. 4 to 5 stitches. And then you want to pull it just tight, just a little. Hardly pull it at all. And clip. And so that's how that looks. It says no. And then we're going to do the crows. And basically the biggest thing is just don't pull too tight. If you pull too tight, it's going to look bad. So it's kind of bulky a little bit, but in person it looks great. So now I'm going to get another strand. This time I'm going to leave it. I don't know what I was doing earlier, but I take this off of the I just pull one out, cut it in half, and then I'm going to thread my needle. Okay, so see what I just did? See how that, okay, right there, that frayed. See all that fraying? When you do that, you got to cut that off. Because I do that sometimes. You cannot leave that on. So I'm going to try to thread it again. So I squeeze it. Okay, so now I'm going to start over to the left right here. So I'm going to pull this under. I'm going to go 4 or 5 stitches. Wait till the thread comes to the end. Oh, see, that's not under enough. That's not really under enough. That's not. So now it's more under. If a pattern calls for a back stitch, is it over 1 square? Will it say if it's long stitch, if it's best to go over a few? So back stitch does mean 1 square. This pattern, when I looked at it this morning, does not say, it just says straight stitches. Oh, it says straight stitches. So a straight stitch is basically a long stitch. Good morning, Lori. She says, looks great, Kimberly, as per usual. That's so funny. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to do all the long stitches. So this is the C, because the ones that always end up looking the worst are the small ones. So that's the C. That is off. See how it's crooked? pull that out. Jan says she would not redo the farm stand. It looks like the lady in the stand had hand wrote it for her stand. Looks great. Okay, well then I'll leave it. This is funny. It's kind of hard to do this, guys. Okay, so there. So I'm gonna redo the C. And then the R is 2 over. So wherever I started and ended, I started at the bottom and went to the top. I'm going to do that same thing. So bottom to top, bottom to top. And then I'm going to do that's the R. And this is kind of a weird way. I've never seen anybody do it this way, but this is the way I can get my stitches to look better. Just to do all these long ones first. So this is the O. And just pull gently, just not too much. Move it over a little. That's part of the W. Part of the W, and then the S. So now I've got the long parts. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the parts that go horizontally because I've done the vertical parts. So I'm going to start with the S and go backwards. And the way I'm going to do it is you don't start and stop in the same one. Let me try to think of the words. Let me just do the S and then so like I'm going to go left to right. Now I'm not going to go back in this hole. I'm going to go below it. There. Now I'm not going to go in this hole. I'm going to go in this hole. It just looks cleaner if you don't go in the hole you just came out of, if that makes sense. I don't know the right words. So, let me see. That looks good. In person, you can't see all that craziness. Now for the W, I'm going to go, and I'm just making this up as I go, but see if you go in here, right here, you've pulled your thread to the left a little too much. So I'm going to move it to where it goes in better. Well, actually, I'll just go up here. Because what you do at this point will alter your other stitches, and then go down. And then I'm going to go back in there. And that looks good. Then I'm going to complete the O. And then Lori answered a question for us, so I'm going to read it to you. The chart will usually say backstitch or specify long stitch, meaning that's what's done on the model. But you're the boss of your own stitch, so you decide. Yes, I agree. And I think that also goes with whether you do backstitch or long stitch and whether you use 1 strand or 2 strand. Whatever you think looks best is what you should do. I'd add a French knot where you made the hole, or maybe all 3 points. So she's saying add a French knot here. But I like the way it looks. I'm not going to change that. I think that looks good. I hate French knots. Okay, so. For if you're looking for another count for this, this fabric right here is beautiful beige, and so Andrea asked For a 32 count recommendation, I would just do 32 count Beautiful Beige. The linen will be slightly darker than the Aida. And then just use your needle to kind of move around your stitches. The R's kind of skinny. And then I've got my C. I think it looks good. So what I'm going to do is turn that over. And look at that hot mess. So I don't worry about the back, making sure it's pretty or anything. I just want my front to look good. Go under 5 stitches, 4 or 5 stitches. And then I don't even tug hardly. So then if I go over here, I think it looks good. Okay, so I've done part 3. 4 and 5 don't need anything, and then 6 right here. I'm gonna pull 6. We're gonna make it say milk with the caterpillar, and then you can use white to do this part. So I'm gonna keep the taking the strands and putting it in half. I wasn't sure on bead position. Are they supposed to lay the same? Okay, so I don't do beading, so I don't know the answer to that at all. And now I have a knot because of course I do. So we're on the video. I'm just gonna cut that knot off. And I just wasted some thread, but that's okay. Okay, so here I'm gonna, this is how I thread my needle. Pinch it. Okay, so this one says milk, and I'm using Lori's Stitchy stand. So I just put it in. If you think this is too loose, you can just put it like this, which I don't, and it'll stand up. So that's kind of what I'm using today because it's easier for me to see. So we're gonna put the word milk here. So I'm gonna start kind of over here. So I'm gonna pull my thread under. It's a little long. And then I'm gonna go under this last stitch again. That's gonna anchor it. Now pull it, and it's, you just need to make sure it's not gonna move. And I am gonna cut a little bit off of this because it's too long. So I'm gonna do the same thing where I do all the vertical stitches first, starting and stopping in the same spot, and then fill in my horizontal. So this is gonna be the M. So I think it's 3 stitches. Yeah, 3. And then again, bottom to top. You could do top to bottom too. But this will give you the cleanest look. Sorry. I'm trying to figure out where I'm at. Okay, there we go. If you just do the long ones, it just gives it some consistency. I don't know how to explain it, but mine come out looking better. So those are my vertical stitches. Now I'm gonna add my vertical. Now this one, if you wanted the K to be centered exactly, you could go a little bit further down, but I don't want to do that because then it won't match my R that was in the other. And then I agree with Lori, don't worry so much about the back as long as the threads are secure. Cross stitches like a mullet. Business in the front and party on the back. Oh my God, I cannot believe I just said that. That's so funny. If I even told my kids that, they'd be like, what is that? Oh my gosh, Lori. God. Oh my gosh. Okay. Yeah, and I would say also just you don't want them to, what? I missed a word. What? I missed it. I went MLK instead of milk. Oh my gosh, I missed. Oh no. Okay, so. Yeah, I missed a word. Okay. This is not going to be good now. M-I, okay. It's like 3 initials. Okay. I need one more. And then this one. Okay. So I'm throwing my needle. I guess if I wouldn't have done them all vertical, I would have caught it before, but I didn't. So M-I-L. And then one more horizontal. Okay, now see how that's crooked? That is crooked, so fixed. Now I have to rethread. Okay, bottom to top, okay. M-I-L-K. Okay, and then I need to go 2 stitches over instead of 1. So I think it's charted to do this. I think it might be a little too fat, but we'll see. No, it looks okay. Might be a little fat. Oh, I'm gonna leave it. Okay, I still did it wrong. Maybe I shouldn't do that method because I just went in the wrong stitch. Yeah, my milk is not really, maybe the word's too simple for me to get. Okay, so I need to scoot over 2, that's why. That's why it looked funny. And just use your needle if you think it doesn't look as good. Now here, what you could do is if you stitched over on this side, on the left side, it's gonna make it look crooked. So make sure you're on the right side. Yay! I think I spelled milk finally. L. And then here I'm going to just start in the center. Yay, it looks good. Okay. So now, party on the back. Business in the front, party in the back. Have you ever heard that before? It reminds me of Kid Rock. Okay. So now I need to put a white stitch here, and it says 2 strands of Cosmo for the sign banner, but I did 1 strand here, up here, so I'm gonna do 1 strand down here because I just don't think that's gonna look good with 1 strand here and then 2 strands. I'm gonna do 1 strand here, and if it doesn't look good, I can just make a second stitch because That's easier than that. So I'm almost out of thread. So I just pull one little strand out, cut it in half. When did you do all the vertical stitches, then do your horizontal stitches? Why? Oh, I did that because I just think they end up looking better because they're all uniform. It's just something I made up and just came up with. Can you use the loop method? We're going to talk about that more in November, but I did loop method for this entire pattern, and I have less variegation than if you would have kept two strands together. So again, I'm gonna just go under here. This one I'm not gonna do under the light because I think you can see it better on the right side, and then secure it right here. See, and that came out, so it wasn't secured enough. When the white color floss is sprinkled over an area, do you do the white or first or last? I always go lightest to darkest, so I would do white first. So for here, I think it's easier just to see outside the microscope or whatever that thing is. Halo Go light, sorry. And we'll see if that looks good. Now I'm gonna pull it a little tight. And so kind of like Lori said, be the boss of your own cross stitch. Like this is supposed to be 2 strands of white, I'm doing 1. Ooh, it looks good. And then I'm gonna look under the light and it looks good. Ooh, it looks good. Okay, so from there, I'm gonna go under 5 stitches. And if you pull to, ooh, I just dropped my needle. If you pull, I don't know what I just did, but I dropped my needle. Oh no. I'll just pull one from here. I'll just pull one from out of here. I'm good. I don't know where I put it. I just hope I don't step on it later. I drop needles all the time in my house. Okay. I'm gonna clean up some floss mess that I have. Mark this off. Okay, French knots, and then, let's see. Ooh, that looks good. So now I've got to do one more sign over here. So I'm going to roll up the right side some more. Now when I roll this, I don't ever put my clamp right there because that's on top of stitches. So I just put it down here where there's no stitches. And then this one says pumpkin patch. So I'm not going to change the words on this one. And I'm going to do 1 strand of caterpillar. I think that might be too short. When I use 1 strand, I have my pattern on a magnetic board with magnetic line keepers, then it stands great. Oh yeah, that's a great idea to put a magnetic board in here. Okay. So I'm gonna do that same thing where I kind of get started over here, and then this one, we'll see if I can spell pumpkin patch correctly with my vertical first and then horizontal second. I just think my stitches come out better that way. It's just, you don't have to do it this way. It's just something I made up. Okay. So these are 3, let's see, 3 tall. So I'm going to start here. This is kind of in the way, so I'm going to kind of get that where it's not in the way. Okay. So I'm going to go up. So that's the start of the P. And then I'm going to do the U. So again, all vertical. So this is the U. And y'all can try this and then leave it in the comments and let me know if yours come out better. I just feel like the tension is kind of the same when you start and stop in that same spot. And I usually do word by word. So this is a U. The M. P-U-M. This is the second start of the M. Okay, I have a little knot. Okay, when you get a knot that looks like this, it's a little circle. Put your needle inside the circle and pull, and it goes away. Okay, so let's see if I remember where I'm at. P-U-M. P. K. I'm talking out loud so that I don't mess up. K. I. I think I'm off. No, I'm not. In. Hopefully I'm not off. If I am, I'll just redo it. So when you look at those, they're all nice and straight. Oh, and I just got a knot. See that knot? The little knot. Just go like that and it goes away. So they're nice and flush. And then I'm gonna add, go back in. Now I am gonna, this is kind of getting, I'm getting those knots. So I'm just gonna unthread and rethread real quick. And then hopefully I have spelled pumpkin correctly. And then after I do pumpkin, I'll do patch off camera, and then I'm gonna talk about French knots and colonial knots. So, well, maybe, okay, hold on. It's getting bulky. Hold on, I've got a kind of mess. Okay. So this is the N, the K, and you'll notice I'm kind of going bottom to top. It kind of just, okay, I'm getting a lot of knots. I have no idea why. I think my thread was too long to start. So my P, what is my needle minder? This right here is Lori's B needle minder. I have it on her little thing. I'll have to put it back in a second. P. How would you backstitch if there's no stitching nearby to anchor it to? I would hold a strand and stitch over it, and then once you finish stitching, I would anchor it again. Just leave a really long tail. So I've got the M. U and the P. Okay, I'll go ahead and do the word patch just to get it done. Let's see what questions we have. I tore my recliner apart once to find a needle. Hate the thought of stray needles floating around the house. Oh, I know. Y'all tell me that all the time. Yeah, I'm really bad. They're on my side of the bed, though. Nobody comes to my side of the bed, so it's fine. So the P. And I do feel like when you're working with back stitches or long stitches, doing them all at one time and all in the same day is going to give your piece a consistent look, because if you do them on different days, it might end up looking not as consistent. So I'm going to do the same thing where I do all of these vertical stitches, and I'm going to go top to bottom. So P. Now this one's kind of hard. This is the A. So that goes here. The A is the hardest one because there's not the stitch that goes across it is a little bit funny. There's the A and then the T. The C. And the H. Lori says, when backstitching, I especially like to use wax as it helps to add stability to the look of the backstitching. Yes, so you can use Lori's beeswax. It's right here. Okay, so now I'm going to cross the letters. Now this one is supposed to be in the center, so like it's not supposed to be there, it's not supposed to be there, it's supposed to be in the center. Well, this is Aida, so it's going to be hard to get it to be straight across. I'll try, and if it doesn't look good, then I'll just use the holes and make it look different. So in fact, I'm going to go look and see what I did. Yeah, I did do half. Okay. Look at what I did in block 1. Okay. So you just kind of have to fiddle to get it right. Lori says, I do my back stitches one square at a time. They're more stable that way. Yes, you can do that. This one I felt like long stitches is better for the look of the piece. I don't think back stitches would look as good. The letters would be too chunky on this one because they're so small. So I think it all depends. Now that is not exactly straight across. So it's off a little bit. So I do like it to be consistent, and I feel like taking the time and just getting it exactly like you want it is going to be worth it in the end. There, that's straight. And then I'm going to do the C. And just don't pull too tight. If you pull too tight, you won't be able to see the words. They'll kind of, because you're stitching on top of stitches, they'll kind of sink into the other stitches. T. See how that pulled too tight? T. Now the A, it's that same thing where you've got to go in between a middle stitch, like, because I'm on Aida. Okay, and that looks not straight. And I always take my time with back stitching, long stitching. Just remember, you can use as many strands as you want. You can do long stitch, you can do back stitch, whatever you want to do is what you should do. I'm going to finish the P. And then so I think that looks good. Oh, I think it looks real good. Okay, so then I'm going to pull under to secure it. And then cut. So now, can we zoom out? We can look at it like overall before we do the knots. So it looks consistent. The one that doesn't is this white, so I will redo that. But if you look at this sign, this sign, this sign, and this sign, they look pretty consistent. Now we're gonna zoom in and look at these little pigs. They're called Piggies. Now Diane has it where you put those little black eyes on the pigs. So I'm not going to use the light because I think it's going to be too hard. We're going to just stay zoomed in. And I'm going to talk about, oh, I do need to do the whiskers. I'll do the whiskers when I do the other white later. So what we're going to do is talk about French knots and colonial knots. On the back of this pattern, it says, Piggy eyes are a French knot using one strand of caterpillar. So I'm going to show you French knots and colonial knots, and I'm going to start with a very short strand because you're going to have a better result. Now, just as a FYI, I am not going to leave these knots in because there are no eyes on any of the people. And I think it's weird to have eyes on pigs and not eyes on people. But I'm going to demo for you how to do a French knot and how to do a colonial knot. And the little pig eye goes right there. So first I'm going to secure it like I've been doing. And I'll show you how to take the knots out because I'm not going to leave the knots in. My stitches are tight, so it's hard to get under there. And you need, oh, yep, that didn't go. This one's not wanting to secure. So on this one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to secure it there. I'm going to go back 2 stitches to secure it. Okay, so it's staying right there. So first I'm going to show you a French knot. You come up in the hole. I'm going to move some bulk out of the way. Now with a French knot, you can do 2 twists or 3. So you hold this to the left. I'm going to twist 3 times. 1, 2, 3. Now you can't go back in the hole because if you go back in the hole, it's going to go to the back of your piece. So you have to either go slightly above the stitch, slightly below the stitch, or to the left or the right. So I'm going to go above the stitch just a tiny bit. Now, this is the most important part. Pull this, get it tight, put your thumb there and pull. And there's a French knot. The pig eyes can be hiding behind the ears, which happens in real life for pigs. That's funny, Lori. Okay, so there's a French knot. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a French knot with 2 twists. Now this is with 1 strand. If you do 2 strands, I think it becomes very bulky. So I would definitely not do 2 strands. But now I'm going to show you, I'm just going to go over here. Now I'm going to take all these out. So because I'm taking them out, I'm going to pull the thread. If I was going to keep it, I would probably start again. So that is a French knot with 3 twists. And you notice I'm kind of starting with it flat. Now I'm going to do a French knot with 2 twists. 1, 2. Go slightly above. Now, of course, you could go to the left or the right, whatever you want to do. Get your needle straight, tight. If this is not tight, it's not going to work. And I do see some questions coming in about the silks. I'm going to go over those tomorrow. So any questions coming in about the NPI, I'm going to answer tomorrow. And so there is that. So it looks exactly the same, except it's not as fat. So I do think the 2 twists looks better. Now I'm going to do a colonial knot. So I'm going to come over here. Okay, so the way to think about it, French knots, you go this way. Colonial knots, you go the opposite way. 1, 2. And I always do 2. I never do 3 on colonial knots. I just don't. I don't know why. Okay, so let me think. Okay, so 1, 2. Go back in the same way, slightly above. Pull it tight. If you don't pull it tight, your eye is going to come out huge. Put your thumb there. And that's a colonial knot. So you could do any way. So then now what I'm going to do is unstitch the knots because I don't want them. And then we'll do like an outro where I'll move all my chairs and stuff. So from here, I don't want any of these knots, so I'm going to just cut. And then I'm going to pull them out from the front because they just pop. The little eyes pop out. This one went to the back somehow. Now because I secured this one, it's going to take longer to get out. Now, I have not used pin stitch. I see that question. I have tried it and I just cannot, can't get it. Okay, so now my piggy eyes are all gone. Okay, so I do have these glasses on because when I'm stitching through the lens, I'm actually having to use my glasses because anyway, very complicated, but the camera gets the stitching, but I cannot see that far up, so that's why. Another thing that I do is when I'm going through the pattern, for example, on this one, it tells me to do something, and you can see this check mark right here. So there's the check mark. If I do it as I'm stitching the pattern, I put a check mark so that I don't even have to think about it when I come back to the end and make my little list. So looking at this as a summary, I did long stitches, meaning 1 strand. So I just did over 3 squares instead of individually. Now you could backstitch and do each square. I felt like it might be a little too chunky. I left the eyes off. I need to go back and add the whiskers to the cat, and I'm gonna redo farm stand probably. We'll see how it looks. Now I'm gonna answer any questions you guys have, so just pop in any questions. This is the thread conditioner that Lori was talking about. Are Colonial Knots more secure? No. Colonial Knots are less, they come out looking cleaner than a French knot. Now, I felt pretty good today. That was pretty good for my French knots to come out that good. The key to French knots is keeping it flat and keeping it really tight. The Colonial Knots just don't look as messy. I don't really know how to explain it, but anytime I am going to use French knots, I will do a Colonial Knot because I think they look better. So the difference between a long stitch and a back stitch is so when I made these stitches, they were long. That's one. When you saw me making those stitches, it was all the way up. If you did a back stitch, it would be one stitch here, one stitch here, and one stitch. So the long or straight stitch is over all the way, it's one stitch. Back stitch would be 3. I am stitching right to left. Is that because I'm right-handed? I don't know. Not sure. When I'm doing the long, I'm just kind of whatever. Yeah, I think I'm stitching left to right because I went pumpkin. As long as your X's, when they're done, finish the same way, it should be fine. If your project finish size is 5 inches square, how big do you cut your fabric? So I would go to our website and we have a cross stitch calculator and you can type all of that in and that will really help you. But if it was me, I'd probably cut it 9 by 9. Yeah, 9 by 9, but I would definitely use our cross stitch calculator. So if you have any questions, any tips, any comments, put them in the box. Thank you so much for watching. And remember, in October, I'm going to talk about counting stitches. And in November, I'm going to talk about fancy floss and using the loop method versus keeping strands together. And I hope you join me tomorrow for tomorrow's live stream. I'll see you then. Bye.